say let's go on and do Rwanda/Ireland, I'm calling this, because there's sort of several stories swirling around this. Mainly that, well, Rishi said already that the migrants fleeing to Ireland proves that our deterrent is working, which was quite based actually. But now Ireland's trying to send them back, and you, I'm sure, will correct me on the details, but they're trying to send them back by saying UK is a safe country. And I tried to make a joke about this and was pedantically picked up on by GB News, but I was saying we can easily prove UK is not a safe country. Just go on Twitter or just any number of things. We can easily show it's not a safe country. But if Ireland can show that UK is a safe country, they can send them back. There's this High Court ruling they've come up with, so they can send the migrants back, and we're obviously going to try and not let them get away with that. Am I basically right? Satire aside, Toby, am I roughly right?
Well, this story has so many levels of irony. It's slightly mind-boggling.
Okay.
But in March, the Irish was it the Irish High Court?
Yeah. Ruled last month that the Irish government's declaration of the UK as a safe third country to which it could return asylum seekers was unlawful owing to the Rwanda bill. Yeah.
And so now what the Irish government... So now that means that Ireland cannot send asylum seekers back across the border into the UK because their courts wouldn't allow them to do that. That could be challenged in the Irish court, and the Irish court would uphold the challenge. So they're doing exactly what Rishi Sunak is doing in response to exactly the same problem when it comes to sending illegal migrants to Rwanda. They're passing a law to override their own courts, even though, you know, Ireland for quite some time now has been presenting itself as a kind of bastion of kind of woke liberalism, you know, unlike the xenophobic Little Englanders, you know, over there in the UK. We embrace diversity. We embrace asylum seekers. Come to us. And now, all of a sudden, they're saying
now they actually have some.
Well,
they already had loads.
Again, another irony is
these are new ones.
They're taking a leaf directly out of Rishi Sunak's book. So Rishi Sunak doesn't want to deal with the vast numbers of legal migrants, which make up the vast majority of migrants entering our country each year. He doesn't want to do anything about that for various reasons. So he's focusing on illegal migrants, stopping the small boats to try and create the impression he's doing something about it, to allay people's anxiety about the huge levels of inward migration. Ditto in Ireland. Ireland had something like 140,000 migrants enter Ireland last year, 13,000 of whom were asylum seekers. So it's less than 10%. But if you can focus on getting rid of these asylum seekers, kicking them back to the UK, it'll look like, you know, the Irish government's doing something about it.
Yeah.
Exactly the same strategy that Rishi's using with the Rwanda policy.
That's funny, yeah. Immigration to Ireland rose by 32% in the year ending last April, with asylum seekers accounting for more than 13,000 of over 140,000 arrivals. As you say, Irish ministers suggest that 80% of the asylum seekers are crossing the border from the UK and have cited the deterrence of Rwanda as a factor. It's working. But they need their own Rwanda, don't they, to just send them somewhere else. They need to pick another country and send them off to Congo. Do you see that guy get confused between Congo and Rwanda on Question Time?
Yes.
So they can send them to Congo.
Yeah, Congo. I don't think Congo is a safe country.
How dare you?
But it's actually a huge boon for Rishi Sunak. I mean, it's enabled him to pick a fight. It was enabled him first of all to say, look, the Rwanda policy is working. Because supposedly the reason all these illegal migrants are flooding across the border is because they don't want to be sent back to Rwanda. Yeah. Incidentally, it's ironic, isn't it, that Ireland and the EU kicked up a massive fuss about the possibility of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. They said that will endanger the Good Friday Agreement, etc., etc., and we bent over backwards to accommodate their objections about that, and for that reason a different kind of customs regime now applies to Northern Ireland that does to the rest of the UK. Now all of a sudden the Irish are saying, oh no, we want a hard border. We don't want these asylum seekers flooding across the border. We want a hard border with Northern. Does that mean we can actually finally do Brexit properly then?
Interesting, yeah.
But the other thing it enables Rishi to say, it enables him to pick a fight with the EU. He's saying, like, why should the EU be able to send back these illegals who've crossed the border into an EU country when we can't send illegals who cross the border from an EU country into the UK back to
Right.
the EU. If we can't send asylum seekers back to France when they try and come here
Mm-hmm.
in small boats, why should we allow the EU to send illegal border crossers back to the UK?
Absolutely. It's the bully boys in Brussels. He can say that.
Yeah, it might even help ameliorate some of the. I think probably come a little late for the locals, but it might. It definitely. If he picks a massive fight with Brussels over this issue, it would actually help him enormously. I think.
It's the one thing he's got tough on. He wants to see this Rwanda thing through, and he's staked his whole reputation on it weirdly because it's not going to win in the election. But I'd like to see it seen through at least.
There was a piece in the Times I read, and the Times, as you know, is pretty woke these days.
Yeah.
And they'd sent a journalist to some of the migrant camps in Calais and Dunkirk, and they were interviewing some of the migrants, and the migrants were talking about how much suffering they'd endured and the terrible risks they'd had to take and friends who died, and it was all kind of terribly pro-migrant, kind of heartstring pulling stuff. And one of the reasons you were expected to you were being asked to sympathise them by the journalist was that some of them were now worried that if they actually made it to the UK, having kind of risked everything and paid vast sums of money to people traffickers to get as far as Calais or Dunkirk, they might be sent to Rwanda. So now they were having second thoughts about making the journey. It's like that was supposed to be, somehow make us even more sympathetic.
Yeah, that's the point of the policy.
That's the whole fucking point.
That's funny. But yeah, they keep dissing Rwanda. I hear it's nice. But Toby, all this is dependent, speaking of the Times, on whether we can find these buggers. I mean, the Times... I suddenly went Churchill on it. The Times is saying Home Office lost contact with thousands set for Rwanda flights, so they can't find half of them. So there's these people. There's the Home Office insisted that the remaining. So there's 5,700 migrants have been identified for removal, but only 2,145 of them continue to report to the Home Office and can be located for detention. So the remaining 3,557 have not necessarily absconded, but are not subject to reporting restrictions, which means they cannot be located. The problem is, Toby, we're deporting the ones that are too dumb to hide, and we're keeping the cunning ones that have managed to hide and avoid this.
Well, that's probably quite good, isn't it?
Yes, we've got, in a way, unless they're criminal, they're smarter, but are they kind of criminal-minded?
Maybe they've kind of disappeared into
We could say we're losing the honest ones in a way. We're sending them back because they're saying, "Hey, yeah, I should be sent back," and so that's my problem with it. But yeah, I mean, you've got to actually find these people, so that would be an embarrassment if they can't.
I think that was, I think, another Times story. The Times very critical of this Rwanda policy, but the whole point of the policy is to deter people from crossing the channel. It's not really about kind of repatriating or sending the people that are already here to Rwanda, and of course we'll have to do that. But the reason it'll reduce illegal migration is to stop people coming here.
But also, in terms of criticisms, Macron, of course, said it was cynical. He said it was a politics of cynicism and a betrayal of European values, as if we care about what he's saying about it. But he mouthed off about the Rwanda thing. Shut up, Macron. But then also,
Germany is now also saying it's having opened its doors to migrants under Merkel,
from Syria,
now proving to be hugely politically unpopular, very destabilising, and they want to start sending their illegal migrants to Rwanda. So funny that Macron.
We're pioneers again.
What about Germany, Macron?
Yeah. We're always pioneers. We always get blamed. We always do the hard thing. We're pioneers. We stand up. We won the war. All comes back to that. But we're pioneers with Brexit. We were the first to do that. Other people will follow. But hey, one more story on this. PM warned diverting judges to Rwanda appeals will drive backlog and soar asylum hotel bills. This was the Telegraph. And the idea is he wants to divert these first-tier tribunal judges, and there's already a massive backlog. So people like Blunkett, as Lord Blunkett has popped up, saying that that they'll just... He's saying the flights will take off, but in doing so, they'll demonstrate just how inept and inadequate the program is, and it will contrast the potential few hundred a year with the tens of thousands who have been ruled to be inadmissible and are stuck in the UK without being processed and without hope of going anywhere. So he's saying, well, it'll be a double whammy because we're paying large sums to Rwanda for a handful of asylum seekers and vast sums here at home to accommodate those whose claims are not being processed. So they're saying that diverting, because this is Rishi's flagship policy, he's going to do everything he can, divert all these judges. They're needed for the existing asylum backlog.
Yeah, but it's like that if you don't send some asylum seekers to Rwanda, then the backlog is never going to decrease because we're going to have a constant flow of illegal migrants across the channel. So, that doesn't. It seems like a pretty short-term objection to me.
Okay, and I'll just say lastly on this actually that there was this piece in the Mail, Sacre Blown, which is kind of a rubbish pun, but it was French police used knives to sink asylum seekers' boat in Dunkirk before an army of migrants then go on to overpower tear gas cops and ride on another dinghy to the UK. So this is like migrant on migrant violence. The French police have been stepping in, trying to pop their boats basically, because it's all done on dinghies. Remember, guys, we're being conquered by dinghies. But then migrants will pile on to it. There was an incident where the migrants piled onto a rival group of migrants, started knocking them off the boat. People died, people were trampled, people drowned. So there's this migrant on migrant violence now, which means this is. People are going to eventually change their mind on this. I mean, the police, they're saying here in France that something needs to change and change quickly, and the police believe they can do this. And they're saying that police don't want to get involved in violence with the migrants, but they must realise this has to change. That's an Interior Ministry source in France. I just wonder if the tone's going to change on this. Ben Habib was grilled by Julia Hartley-Brewer, sorry. I know she's your mate, but she was very much like, this is appalling what Ben's saying. And he was sort of taking us on a hard line. He's saying we're meant to be a force at the border. It's called border force. It's not our responsibility what happens to these people. Is it going to get, finally, the language more tough and the reality more tough on how you deal with migrants? If only partly because they're hurting other migrants. But what do you think, Toby?
I mean, it's certainly becoming less taboo to take a hard line about illegal immigration than it was even 5 years ago. I mean, during the EU referendum, Vote Leave didn't want to be associated too closely with Nigel Farage because they thought his attitude towards migrants was toxic and would alienate kind of moderate centre voters, and they wouldn't win the Brexit referendum. And maybe at the time that was the right political calculation, but you can imagine that calculation being made, but less likely to be made now. It seems like there's been a change in public attitudes towards migration, and there's this kind of inhibition about criticising the government for letting too many migrants into our country, particularly as it's all increased since Brexit. That inhibition seems to be certainly declining.
Yeah, because the situation's become.
But you can imagine if the Rwanda policy works and the migrant camps in Calais and elsewhere on the French coast, if they become entrenched, completely entrenched with the same people but getting more crowded, you can imagine the French actually finally doing something about it. If they're no longer a way station because the migrants are no longer crossing the channel because they don't want to risk being deported to Rwanda, the French, I imagine, will really move in and start dismantling those camps.